In the quiet moments of our lives, when the noise of the world falls away, we often find ourselves face to face with questions that have no easy answers. How much of ourselves should we reveal to those we love? Where is the line between honesty and unnecessary burden? What secrets should remain ours alone? These questions become even more pressing as we enter the autumn of our lives. The weight of decades, filled with triumphs and regrets, wisdom gained and opportunities missed, sits heavy on our shoulders. And sometimes in our desire for connection or absolution, we risk saying too much. Today, we will look into the delicate art of knowing what not to share, even with those closest to us. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can give our loved ones isn't complete transparency, but thoughtful discretion. The Stoic philosophers understood this paradox centuries ago. "The wise man will live as long as he ought, not as long as he can," wrote Seneca. And in that wisdom lies a profound truth. Our words, like our years, should be measured not by their quantity, but by their quality and purpose. For those of us navigating the complexities of our later years, learning when to speak and when to embrace silence isn't just a matter of privacy. It's an act of love, of protection, and sometimes of profound respect for both ourselves and others. To illustrate this, let me share a nice story with you. In a quiet corner of the town library, where light filters through high windows and dust lingers in the air, like old stories left unread, two men sit face to face in the quiet rhythm of late afternoon. Michael Reynolds, freshly retired at 65, traces his finger along the spine of a worn book he hasn't opened, his mind heavier than the volume in front of him. Across from him sits Mr. Samuel Hartley, a man in his 80s whose presence feels as calm as the room itself. They are not old friends, but something in Samuel's manner invites trust. The library around them whispers with the soft sounds of pages turning and the occasional muted conversation. It's a sanctuary of sorts, a place where thoughts can breathe, and wisdom can be exchanged without judgment. Michael, like many at the threshold of elderhood, is carrying thoughts he's unsure he should speak, and unsure if it's safe to remain silent. He breaks the stillness. "Sometimes I feel like I need to explain myself to my kids, say what I regret, what I fear." His voice is low, almost defensive, as if he's already anticipating resistance to the idea. Samuel looks at him with eyes that have witnessed decades of human struggle. He doesn't rush to respond, allowing Michael's words to settle between them. Then he responds gently, "Sometimes silence protects more than confession reveals." Michael shifts in his chair, not fully convinced. His fingers drum lightly on the table, betraying his inner conflict. But isn't honesty the foundation of any relationship, especially with your children? Honesty, yes, Samuel nods slowly. But total disclosure, that's different. He gestures toward the countless books surrounding them. Even the greatest stories know what details to leave out. Michael considers this, his brow furrowing slightly. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want to tell them, about my regrets, about my fears for the future." He pauses, looking down at his hands that have worked, held children, and now sometimes tremble without his permission. "About the mistakes I made as their father." Samuel leans forward, his hand resting lightly on a journal bound in leather. "Let me show you something." He opens the journal, not to share its contents, but only to reveal the blank pages. Not every page has to be filled to be meaningful. The metaphor isn't lost on Michael, but doubt still clouds his expression. "I just don't want to leave things unsaid. When my father died, he took so many stories with him, so many explanations. And yet, you survived without those explanations," Samuel points out gently. "Perhaps even grew from their absence." Michael hadn't considered this perspective. He looks around the library, noticing for the first time a younger man browsing through the philosophy section nearby. The man, perhaps in his 40s, seems absorbed in his search, unaware of their conversation. What we choose not to say can be as powerful as what we do, Samuel continues, his voice lowering to match the library's hushed atmosphere. Especially at our age, the weight of our words increases with the years we've lived. We're here to share life lessons worth remembering. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Continuing, thus begins their quiet, layered conversation, rooted in personal experience and old philosophy, shaded with tact and emotional weight. What follows is a shared reflection, a kind of whispered pact outlining things no one over 65 should ever feel obligated to share with family. Michael leans in, genuinely curious now. Like what exactly? Samuel takes a moment, gathering his thoughts. Like the fear of becoming a burden, he finally says, his voice steady but soft. Michael's eyes lower when Samuel speaks of it. This fear has been his silent companion for months now, ever since he noticed his son watching him struggle with the garage steps. Voicing it doesn't lift it, it transfers it, Samuel says. Your children will love you, yes, but with fear, with guilt, and one day perhaps even with resentment. But they'll know eventually, Michael argues, though with less conviction than before. Knowing and being told are different experiences, Samuel replies. One allows them to adjust gradually, to find their own way to acceptance. The other, he trails off, letting Michael complete the thought for himself. The library has grown quieter still, as if the building itself is listening to their exchange. Outside, afternoon shadows lengthen across the parking lot. Michael hesitates, then confesses he's long wanted to apologize for moments of absence in his son's childhood. Baseball games, missed for work, homework help deferred to his wife. Doesn't he deserve to know I recognize those failings? But Samuel interrupts with unexpected firmness. You may relieve yourself, but you will wound their image of the past. Some regrets, like wounds, must scar in private. Michael frowns. Isn't truth better than silence? He asks, an edge of frustration creeping into his voice. Samuel pauses, then replies, only when the truth uplifts. If not, it is just another form of selfishness, dressed as honesty. These words hang between them, challenging and profound. Michael finds himself wondering if his desire to confess has been more about unburdening himself than truly benefiting his children. There are other things too, Samuel continues after a moment, that might seem important to share, but often cause more harm than good. Michael nods, encouraging him to continue. In the distance, the library's clock chimes softly, marking the passage of another hour. Samuel speaks of inheritance details, of disapproval of children's partners, of medical prognoses shared in unnecessary detail. With each example, Michael recognizes himself. The conversations he's been rehearsing in his mind, the confessions he's been saving. You think you're giving them truth, Samuel says as their discussion deepens, but often it's just inherited confusion. He pulls an old book off the shelf, flips to a page, and reads from Epictetus. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. The words settle in the air like dust on the floor, delicate but impossible to ignore. Michael sits quietly, absorbing this new perspective. He thinks about the conversations he's been planning to have with his daughter this weekend, about how he really feels about her husband, about the health scare his doctor mentioned. Might be nothing but could be something. There's wisdom in discretion, Samuel says, noticing Michael's thoughtful silence. Not everything gained from our years needs to be spoken. Some lessons are best taught by how we carry ourselves through difficulty. By now the sun has dipped low, casting gold across the carpeted aisles. The library is near empty. Michael says little, but his silence has changed. It is no longer heavy with unsaid things, but light with understanding. So what should we share? Michael finally asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Samuel smiles, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. Our presence, our attention, our example. He closes his journal gently, and most importantly, our acceptance that they must find their own way, just as we found ours. Later, when Samuel rises to leave, Michael stays behind. He doesn't pick up the book he was tracing earlier. Instead, he opens his own journal, the one he never dared write in, and finally begins, not to confess to his children, but to himself. His thoughts, his reflections, his private truths. The kind of writing that no one ever needs to see. In the far aisle, the younger man named David, who had overheard fragments of their talk, lingers by the philosophy section. He won't speak to them today, but something in him shifts too, because wisdom, when offered humbly, doesn't just teach, it ripples. As Michael begins writing in his journal, he realizes something profound. The conversations we choose not to have can be as defining as those we do. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give to those we love is not our complete truth, but the space for them to discover their own. What follows are the 7 things that Samuel shared with Michael. 7 revelations that should perhaps remain private, even from those we love most. 7 boundaries that, when respected, protect not only ourselves, but also those we care about most deeply. Now let's look into the first of these 7 crucial boundaries that Samuel shared with Michael. 7 things that those of us in our later years might be tempted to reveal, but should perhaps reconsider. Number 1, the fear of becoming a burden. It's a fear that grows quietly as we age, often keeping us awake in the small hours when the world is still. We notice our children watching us navigate stairs we once took 2 at a time. We see the flicker of concern in their eyes when we search for a word that once came easily. And something in us wants to name this fear out loud, to confess that we worry about the day we might need more from them than they can comfortably give. Samuel sets his teacup down carefully. That fear of dependency haunts almost everyone our age, he tells Michael. It's natural to want to voice it, to prepare them, to seek reassurance. Michael nods slowly. I've come close to saying it so many times, especially after my sister moved in with her daughter last year. I saw what it did to their relationship, and that's precisely why such fears are better left unexpressed, Samuel responds. The weight of these words settles between them. Michael considers the difference between preparation and burden, between honest conversation and emotional taxation. By keeping this particular fear private, Samuel continues, you allow your children to approach each stage of your aging as it comes, without the shadow of your anxiety coloring their experience before it's even necessary. Michael thinks about his son David, who already calls more frequently than he used to, who already suggests help with tasks Michael can still manage. But if I don't tell them, won't they be unprepared when the time comes? There's a difference between practical preparation and emotional burden, Samuel replies. Share your medical directives, your wishes for care, your financial arrangements, but not the weight of your fear. That's yours to carry, or better yet, to release. This is the essence of Stoic wisdom, recognizing what we can control and what we cannot, and finding peace in that recognition. Our fears about future dependency fall largely into the realm of the uncontrollable, and sharing them often transfers unnecessary weight to shoulders not designed to bear it. Number 2, deep regrets about parenting decisions. The library has grown quieter now, the afternoon crowd thinning as closing time approaches. Michael shifts in his chair, clearly troubled by this second point. This one's difficult for me, he admits. I've been rehearsing an apology to my son for years, for prioritizing work when he was younger, for missing the moments I can never get back. Samuel's eyes show understanding, but his response is measured. The desire to apologize comes from a good place, he acknowledges. But have you considered what your son would actually gain from hearing these regrets? Michael hadn't thought of it that way. Wouldn't it help him to know that I recognize my mistakes, that I would do things differently if I could? Perhaps, Samuel says. Or perhaps it would only reshape his memories, inserting your regret into moments he remembers with simple joy or acceptance. This gives Michael pause. He thinks about the fishing trips they did take, rather than the baseball games he missed. He wonders if his son even remembers the absences that have haunted him for decades. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel if you like this kind of content. Now, back to where we were. But don't we owe them the truth? Michael persists. Samuel leans forward, his weathered hands folded on the table. We owe them our best selves in the present moment. Not all truth serves others. Some truth simply unbinds us from our own guilt, while burdening others with information they cannot use. You may relieve yourself, Samuel continues gently, but you will wound their image of the past. Some regrets, like wounds, must scar in private. Michael frowns. Isn't truth better than silence? He asks, an edge of frustration creeping into his voice. Samuel pauses, then replies with the wisdom that comes from decades of observation. Only when the truth uplifts. If not, it is just another form of selfishness, dressed as honesty. This is a challenging perspective, but one worth considering. The Stoic philosophers taught that virtue lies not just in truthfulness, but in discernment, in understanding the impact of our words on others and choosing them accordingly. As we age, the temptation to unburden ourselves of parental regret grows stronger. We see more clearly the consequences of our choices, the ripple effects of our priorities. But unburdening ourselves at the cost of burdening our children is rarely the wise choice. Number 3, the full disclosure of inheritance. Details. As their conversation continues, Samuel brings up another area where silence often serves better than full disclosure: the specific details of inheritance and financial plans. Of course, your children should know you've made arrangements, Samuel explains. They should know where to find important documents and understand your general intentions. But sharing the complete details, especially unequal distributions or specific amounts, rarely ends well. Michael clenches the edge of the table, remembering a family quarrel from years ago that began with a will. His cousin hasn't spoken to his aunt in 15 years, all because of a revelation that could have waited until after her passing. I've been wondering whether to tell my daughter that she'll receive less than her brother, Michael admits quietly. Not because I love her less, but because he has 3 children and she chose not to have any. I want to explain my reasoning. While I still can, Samuel shakes his head slowly. Think of what sharing this information would actually accomplish. Would it bring peace? Or would it plant seeds of comparison, of perceived favoritism, of subtle resentment that might color your remaining years together? Speak too soon, Samuel says, and you'll watch your name whispered in strategies. You'll see the subtle calculations behind their eyes when they visit, the weight of future inheritance hovering over simple family dinners. This observation resonates with Michael. He's seen it happen in other families, the changed dynamics after financial revelations, the subtle positioning that follows too much transparency. The Stoics understood that wealth becomes a burden when it occupies too much of our thoughts. Samuel adds, why place that burden on your children before it's necessary? Instead, Samuel suggests creating a letter to be read after passing, one that explains the reasoning behind financial decisions with love and without expectation of response. This approach allows for honesty without creating unnecessary tension in relationships that still have years to flourish. Number 4, disapproval of their partners. The conversation shifts to another common temptation for parents in their later years, sharing honest opinions about their children's choice of partners. Michael starts to say something about his daughter's husband, but Samuel lifts a hand gently. This may be the boundary most frequently crossed. and the one that causes the deepest wounds. But if we see problems they don't, if our experience gives us perspective they lack, don't we owe them that insight? Michael asks, thinking about his son-in-law's career instability, his tendency to leave jobs when challenges arise. Consider what actually changes when you voice that disapproval, Samuel replies. Does your adult child suddenly see their partner through your eyes? Or do they simply feel judged, not just in their choice of partner, but in their judgment overall? Michael reflects on this. He remembers his own parents' thinly veiled criticism of his wife when they first married. Criticism that did nothing to change his choice, but did create tension that lasted for years. You'll lose her trust, not him, Samuel says simply. Let her discover who he is without hearing who you think he isn't. This doesn't mean being dishonest, Samuel clarifies. It means focusing on supporting the relationship rather than criticizing it. It means asking questions rather than offering judgments. It means recognizing that our children's journeys belong to them, including the lessons they must learn through their own experiences. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that we cannot control external events, only our responses to them. Samuel reminds Michael, your daughter's choice of partner is external to you. Your relationship with her is what you can nurture and protect. Michael nods slowly, beginning to understand the pattern in Samuel's guidance. It's not about deception or even complete silence. It's about discernment, about recognizing which truths serve others and which merely unburden ourselves at someone else's expense. So, I just say nothing when I see concerning behaviors? Michael asks, still not entirely convinced. Not exactly, Samuel replies. You focus on asking questions that help them discover their own truth. You create space for them to voice their concerns without inserting yours. You demonstrate in your own life the kind of relationship dynamics you hope they'll recognize as valuable. This approach requires patience, a virtue that should grow with age, but often diminishes as we feel time growing shorter. It requires faith in our children's capacity to find their own way, even if that way includes detours we might have helped them avoid. As the afternoon light shifts to evening's deeper glow, Michael finds himself reconsidering conversations he had planned to have with his children. The boundaries Samuel has outlined challenge his assumptions about honesty and connection, about the responsibilities of parenthood in its later stages. And yet, there's something freeing in this perspective too. A release from the obligation to speak every truth, to confess every regret, to voice every concern. There's wisdom in discernment, in the careful weighing of words against their potential impact. Samuel checks his watch. Perhaps we should continue this another time, he suggests, noting the library's approaching closing hour. But Michael isn't ready to end the conversation. Please, he says, I want to hear the rest. This perspective, it's challenging everything. I've been believing about honest communication. Samuel smiles gently. That's precisely the point. True honesty isn't about saying everything we think or feel. It's about ensuring that what we do say serves a purpose beyond our own unburdening. Michael nods, ready to hear the remaining boundaries that Samuel believes should be maintained, even, or perhaps especially, with those we love most deeply. Number 5. Your entire medical prognosis. As the library grows quieter around them, Samuel continues with the 5th boundary, one that becomes increasingly relevant as we age. There's a natural inclination, Samuel begins, to share every detail of our health challenges with our children, every concerning test result, every specialist's uncertainty, every possibility the doctors have mentioned, no matter how preliminary. Michael nods in recognition. Just last month, his doctor had mentioned a shadow on his lung scan that was probably nothing, but he'd immediately called both his children before the follow-up appointment, confirmed it was indeed nothing to worry about. I thought I was keeping them informed, Michael says. Isn't that better than keeping them in the dark? Samuel considers this carefully. There's a difference, he explains, between preparing your family and burdening them with medical information they can't use and possibilities that may never materialize. When my wife was diagnosed with cancer, Samuel continues, his voice softening with the memory, every doctor had a different opinion about her prognosis. Some offered hope, others caution. Had I shared every fluctuation in their assessment? With our children, they would have lived on an emotional roller coaster for her final years. This perspective gives Michael pause. He remembers the weeks of anxiety his daughter experienced after his premature sharing of that initial scan result. Anxiety that proved unnecessary and took a toll on her already busy life. Share what they need to walk beside you, not to carry you, Samuel advises. They need to know about confirmed diagnoses that will affect your life and theirs. They need to understand treatments you're pursuing and support you may require. But the uncertain edges of prognosis, the statistical possibilities that may never apply to your specific case, these often serve only to amplify anxiety without adding meaningful preparation. Samuel explains that this boundary isn't about deception. It's about timing and proportionality. It's about filtering medical information through a simple question. What purpose will sharing this particular detail serve for my loved ones right now? The Stoics practiced focusing on the present reality rather than anxious speculation about the future, Samuel reminds Michael. When we share every medical uncertainty, we invite our children to abandon that present focus and instead worry about futures that may never arrive. Michael thinks about his neighbor who spent 3 years preparing his family for a death that medical statistics predicted, only to outlive those predictions by nearly a decade. By the time his actual health declined, his family had already processed a grief that hadn't been necessary, had already reorganized their lives around an absence that didn't occur when expected. I never thought of it that way, Michael admits. I've always believed that more information is better, that it helps them prepare. Preparation is important, Samuel agrees, but there's a difference between practical preparation and emotional taxation. One serves them, the other may simply drain them of energy they need for their own lives. This boundary requires particular discernment, a careful balancing of honesty and protection, of information and burden. It means asking ourselves whether sharing certain medical details serves our need for support or truly serves our loved ones' need to know. Number 6. Long-held family secrets. As evening approaches, the library lights brighten to compensate for the fading natural light. Samuel turns to what might be the most controversial boundary of all. As we age, he says, many of us feel a growing urge to unburden ourselves of secrets we've carried for decades, old infidelities, hidden addictions from our younger years, financial mistakes we've never revealed, family history that's been carefully obscured. Please hit the subscribe button if you appreciate advice like this. It helps us create more content you can use. Back to where we were, Michael shifts uncomfortably, thinking of his own family's unspoken truths, his father's drinking problem that was never acknowledged, his mother's brother who disappeared from family narratives after some long-ago disagreement. But doesn't every family have a right to know their true history? Michael asks. Don't our children deserve the complete picture of where they come from? Samuel's response is measured. You think you're giving them truth, he says, but often it's just inherited confusion. What seems like unburdening to you may become a burden for them. Information they didn't seek and now cannot unknow. He pulls an old book off the shelf, flips to a page, and reads from Epictetus. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. The words settle in the air like dust on the floor, delicate but impossible to ignore. The Stoics understood that our actions speak more truly than our confessions, Samuel continues, closing the book gently. The example of how we live now matters more than the revelation of how we erred decades ago. Michael considers this perspective. So we just take these secrets to our graves? Isn't that another kind of dishonesty? It depends on the secret, Samuel replies, and more importantly, on the purpose revealing it would serve. Ask yourself, who benefits from this revelation? Does it offer healing or merely transfer pain from one generation to another? Does it provide context that helps someone understand their present, or does it simply complicate their past without offering tools for integration? This nuanced approach challenges the idea that complete disclosure is always virtuous. It suggests that some truths, especially those about events long past that cannot be changed, may sometimes be better left unsaid. I'm not suggesting we maintain harmful secrets that directly impact others' well-being, Samuel clarifies. If your secret affects your children's health, their identity, or their ability to make informed decisions about their own lives, that's different. But many of the secrets we carry are simply our own past failings, lessons we've learned but need not teach through confession. Michael remembers his friend Harold, who in his late 70s suddenly revealed to his adult children that their mother had once had an affair decades earlier, long after she had passed away, and could not offer her perspective. The revelation shattered not only their image of their mother, but also their trust in their father's motivations for sharing this information so late in life. The determining factor, Samuel suggests, should be whether revelation serves healing or simply serves unburdening. Does it offer others insight that improves their lives, or does it merely transfer your discomfort to their shoulders? This boundary, perhaps more than any other, requires deep introspection about our motivations. Are we revealing family secrets for others' benefit or for our own emotional release? The answer to this question should guide our choices about which truths to speak and which to hold in compassionate silence. Number 7. The quiet sacrifices they never knew you made. As their conversation nears its conclusion, Samuel addresses what might seem like the most innocent disclosure of all, and yet one that carries its own subtle burden. Many parents, he observes, reach a point where they want their children to know exactly what was given up for them. The career opportunities declined for family stability, the personal dreams deferred, the financial sacrifices that were never mentioned. Michael nods in immediate recognition. Just last week, he'd nearly told his daughter about the job in California he'd turned down when she was in high school, a position that would have advanced his career significantly, but would have uprooted her during a vulnerable time. I've thought about telling them, Michael admits, not to make them feel guilty, but just so they know, so they understand the choices that shaped our family. And what would that knowledge give them? Samuel asked gently. What would it add to their lives to know about sacrifices they never asked you to make? This question catches Michael off guard. He's never considered whether this knowledge would benefit his children, only whether it would satisfy his own desire to have these sacrifices acknowledged. Don't make them carry a debt they never owed, Samuel advises. It's not love if it comes with a receipt. These words, simple but profound, strike at the heart of unconditional love. True sacrifice, by definition, expects nothing in return, not even recognition. To reveal sacrifices later in life, even with the stated intention of simply sharing our story, can subtly shift the balance of familial obligation. But don't they benefit from seeing the example of sacrifice? Michael challenges. From understanding that parenthood involves giving things up? They'll learn that lesson through their own experience of caring for others, Samuel replies, and they'll learn it more deeply if they don't feel it comes with emotional strings attached to their relationship with you. Samuel explains that this boundary protects not only our children from unnecessary guilt, but also ourselves from the subtle resentment that can grow when sacrifices are named but cannot be repaid. It preserves the purity of the giving that defined our earlier parenting. Yes, the Stoics believed that virtue was its own reward, Samuel reminds Michael. The satisfaction of having made the right choice for your family should be enough. The external acknowledgement adds nothing to the intrinsic value of your sacrifice. This perspective transforms how Michael views the stories he's been collecting to share. Perhaps these particulars of parental sacrifice are part of his story, but not necessarily part of the story his children need to hear. As they reach the end of Samuel's 7 boundaries, Michael sits back in his chair, processing all he's heard. The library is nearly empty now, the closing announcement imminent, but Samuel has one final thought to share. These boundaries aren't about creating distance, he says, noting the slightly overwhelmed look on Michael's face. They're about creating the right kind of closeness, one based on present connection rather than past unburdening. Michael nods slowly. It's almost the opposite of what I've been believing, he admits. I've been thinking that more disclosure would bring us closer. Disclosure can create intimacy, Samuel acknowledges, but it can also create burden. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference. As they prepare to leave, Michael notices again the younger man who has been browsing nearby throughout their conversation. He wonders how much the man has overheard, whether any of this wisdom might have reached him too. One last question, Michael says as they gather their belongings. If there are all these things we shouldn't share, what should we be sharing with our adult children? How do we create the closeness I'm seeking? Samuel smiles, appreciating the genuine desire for connection behind Michael's question. Share. Your presence, he says simply, your attention, your acceptance of who they are becoming. Share your delight in their journey without overwriting it with your own. These words offer a path forward, one that doesn't depend on unburdening oneself of difficult truths, but rather on creating space for new connections unburdened by the weight of unnecessary disclosure. The library's closing announcement sounds, and Samuel rises to leave. Perhaps we could continue this conversation another day, he suggests. Michael nods, grateful for the perspective he's gained and intrigued by the new approach to family relationships it suggests. As they walk toward the exit, he feels lighter, somehow unburdened not by confession, but by the permission to keep certain truths as his own. By now, the sun has dipped low, casting gold across the carpeted aisles. The library is near empty, save for Michael, Samuel, and the younger man named David, who has lingered nearby throughout their conversation. As they gather their belongings, preparing to head their separate ways, Michael appears transformed from the man who arrived earlier that afternoon. "Thank you," Michael says simply, extending his hand to Samuel. "You've given me a lot to think about." Samuel smiles, clasping Michael's hand in both of his own. "Remember, discretion isn't dishonesty. It's an act of love, both for your children and for yourself." As they walk toward the exit, the younger man, David, finally approaches them. He's been shelving the philosophy book he was browsing, listening more intently than either of them realized. "Excuse me," he says, his voice tentative but his expression determined. "I couldn't help overhearing parts of your conversation. I'm visiting my father this weekend. He's about your age." He nods toward Michael. "And lately, every conversation feels like a confessional. It's becoming difficult." Michael and Samuel exchange glances, recognizing the ripple effect of wisdom shared in the right moment. "Perhaps," Samuel suggests gently, "he's seeking connection but choosing the wrong currency for exchange." David nods slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "That's exactly it. He keeps telling me things I'm not sure how to respond to. Regrets about his choices when I was young, worries about becoming dependent. It's like he's suddenly unburdening himself of everything at once. And it feels heavy," Michael observes, now seeing the situation from the perspective Samuel has helped him understand. "Yes," David agrees, "heavy in a way that changes things between us. I want to be there for him, but you need him to be there for you too." Samuel completes the thought, present in the moment, not lost in disclosure. The three men stand together in the library's entrance, 3 generations linked by a conversation about boundaries and connection. David thanks them both, and departs with a new perspective on his relationship with his father. A perspective that might help them find balance in their exchanges. As Michael and Samuel step into the evening air, Michael thinks about his own journal waiting at home, the one he'd planned to fill with all the things he thought his children should know. He realizes now that perhaps the journal should remain private, a place for his own processing rather than a legacy of unburdening. "I think I'll call my daughter tonight," Michael says as they prepare to part ways. "Not to confess anything or explain myself, just to listen." Samuel nods approvingly. The gift of your attention without expectation might be the most valuable thing you can offer. Later that evening, when Michael returns home, he does call his daughter. Their conversation is lighter than it's been in months, unclouded by the weight of revelations he'd been planning to share. Instead of unburdening himself of past regrets, he asks about her present joys. Instead of explaining his financial decisions, he expresses interest in her current projects. And in that space of present connection, something shifts between them. A tension he hadn't even recognized begins to dissolve. When he finally opens his journal that night, he doesn't write the confessions he'd been planning. Instead, he writes about the wisdom he's gained from Samuel, about the boundaries that protect connection rather than inhibiting it. He writes not for his children to discover someday, but for himself, to clarify his thinking, to anchor his intentions, to remind himself of the gift of discernment. In the quiet of his study, Michael realizes that the urge to share everything, every fear, every regret, every sacrifice, comes from a place of love, but doesn't always serve love's deepest purpose. True connection, he now understands, isn't built on complete disclosure, but on thoughtful presence. Not on unburdening ourselves at any cost, but on creating space where others can flourish unburdened by our own unprocessed emotions. This wisdom, from the Stoic tradition, this understanding of what to hold close and what to share, offers us all a pathway to more meaningful connections in our later years. It challenges the modern assumption that complete transparency is always virtuous, always healing. It suggests instead that discernment is the higher virtue, the careful weighing of what serves true connection and what merely serves our own unburdening. So, what about you? As you navigate your own later years, what boundaries might you need to establish, not to create distance, but to foster the right kind of closeness with those you love? Perhaps you've been carrying regrets about your parenting choices, believing your children deserve to hear these confessions. Maybe you've been planning to share details about your health concerns that would burden rather than prepare them. Or perhaps you've been tempted to reveal family secrets or sacrifices that might alter the foundation of your relationships. Ask yourself, who truly benefits from these revelations? Do they serve connection, or do they simply transfer your emotional weight to shoulders that were never meant to carry it? The Stoic philosophers understood that wisdom lies not just in what we choose to say, but in what we choose to keep private. They knew that true virtue is found in accepting what we cannot change about the past, while focusing our energy on what we can control in the present moment. How might your relationships transform if you shifted your focus from unburdening yourself of the past to being fully present in the now? How might your connections deepen if you offered your acceptance rather than your confessions, your attention rather than your regrets? This doesn't mean maintaining harmful secrets or withholding information others genuinely need. It means developing the wisdom to discern which truths serve connection and which merely serve our own emotional release. It means recognizing that our later years offer not just an opportunity to look backward in reflection, but forward in continued growth and meaningful relationship. Will you, like Michael, reconsider what stories truly need telling? Will you examine your motivations when the urge to confess or explain yourself arises? Will you distinguish between unburdening that serves only you and sharing that genuinely serves others? The quiet dignity of aging doesn't come from having all our past actions acknowledged or all our sacrifices recognized. It comes from the grace of knowing which weights are ours to carry and which gifts are truly ours to give. In the space between complete disclosure and complete privacy lies the art of meaningful connection, an art that becomes ever more crucial. As our years advance, it's in this thoughtful middle ground that we find the deepest expression of love, not in unburdening ourselves at any cost, but in ensuring that our words and our silences alike serve those we cherish most. As you move forward, from this moment, carrying the wisdom of Samuel's 7 boundaries, consider what shifts might be possible in your own relationships. Not dramatic reversals or uncomfortable confessions, but subtle adjustments in what you choose to share and what you choose to process privately. The gift of your presence, unburdened by the weight of unnecessary disclosure, may be exactly what your loved ones need most from you now. And in that gifting, you may discover a freedom and connection more profound than any unburdening could provide. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more advice tailored to your needs. Remember, your best years are ahead. Every day we share stories and lessons that speak to the heart. Subscribe and join us.